Weren't you a little hard on the guy, Mike?
Hell, Doc. That clown was Adolf Hitler.
This is I Don't Even Own a Television, Callahan's Crosstime Saloon.
1, 2, 3. There are books that are good, there are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all. 'Cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
Welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about bad books. I am J.W. Friedman.
I'm Chris Collision.
And today we are here to talk about a book called Callahan's Crosstime Saloon by Spider Robinson, and that is the name he prefers to use.
As far as I know, that's his actual name, but I did somewhat less research than you might expect this time around, so if his name's actually Dave, and you know that, and we don't, be super happy that you know that and we don't.
I mentioned reading this on Twitter, and a listener sent me a link to an interview. Oh. His name is Robert.
Oh.
At one point in time in
Robert
his
Robertson?
youth, he decided that he was tired of being Robert and asked his friends to pick a new name, and supposedly they unanimously decided on Spider.
He is kind of like a tall, skinny-looking guy, so I guess that makes sense. He could be a little spidery.
I don't buy it.
All right.
Yeah. No, that's a nickname you give yourself. Definitely.
Oh, like the guy I know, or the guy I knew when I was a bartender who really asked us all to call him Tebow.
I've been spending my entire life trying to figure out how to get people to call me Doc without explicitly asking. So I feel the struggle. It's real.
Sounds good, Doc. Wink.
Hey, listeners.
Yeah, that really explains a lot. Like, for example, the lab coat you're wearing.
The fact that I greet people with a stethoscope.
The Bunsen burners.
That's true. Yeah, so just a heads up, too, before we get started, I want to apologize in advance. I'm on the tail end of a horrible cold, so I know I sound quite phlegmatic. And apologies.
Sounds like you should have gone to see yourself.
Yeah, maybe. Doc.
1 minute callback. So yeah, how did we find this this delightful little nugget?
This was a listener suggested book, sort of. This is the first book in a very long series, and I believe the book that was suggested was later in the series. But we ran into a couple problems, which was we couldn't find the book,
right? And
it didn't seem like it would make much sense if you hadn't read this one. So we figured this was the best entry point to the Callahan Saloon series.
Yeah.
And boy, were we right.
Ish. Yeah, we definitely returned to the source, and this did come up somewhere in one or another Facebook thread. I kind of jumped on it because when I was a kid, my dad subscribed to Analog, the science fiction magazine where most of these first appeared. And this was the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s by this point, and I was reading much later entries in the series by then, and I loved them. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to try to sound cooler than I am. When I was 12 or 14, I thought that this was the best. And so I thought this one actually might be a little more fun than normal.
Yeah.
And I was very wrong.
Well, I'll argue with that. This book I did not find unenjoyable to read. It's a groaner, and we'll get into that a lot more as we go through. But this book's, I'd say, primary stock in trade is puns.
Absolutely. And I think the overall vibe of the book is sort of just light, frothy fun over this like weird libertarian core, right? And we'll get into that. And that's maybe the biggest challenge of the book for me, is that there are fun, pleasurable elements, but it's very light, but it's trying to handle all these heavy topics.
Yeah.
So you literally have one-liners about rape. You literally have one-liners about Hitler, like you may remember from
the cold
3.5 minutes ago.
Yeah, this book has tone problems, and we'll get into that more. But I think before we get too far into talking about it, we should attempt to sum up what it's about. So here is plot in 60 seconds.
Nobody knows if you finish or not. You got 60 seconds to give them the plot. Plot in 60 seconds.
Just doesn't sound the same without the reggaeton horn.
No. All right, plot in 60 seconds. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's try it.
All right. This is a book of short stories without any kind of overarching part. or plot, but it does have consistent characters and themes and a single setting. The setting is a bar in Long Island, populated exclusively by men. Men with pain. Men who like sharing their feelings. Men who like puns. At this bar, if you buy a drink, you can make a toast, and if you feel like talking afterward, everyone in the bar has to listen to you talk about your problems and feelings. In the first story, a super powerful robot shares that he was sent here to destroy us, but doesn't want to, and he saves the world with a stupid pun. Other stories feature man's inhumanity to man, the overwhelming pace of social and technological change, puns, and white men learning to feel better about themselves. In the last story, the super robot saves the world from some dickhead aliens who, it turns out, are the ones to blame for the 20th century, and we all feel better about ourselves because our problems just aren't our fault. Also, there's puns. I cannot stress that enough.
You did it. Yeah, that's accurate. So this book is basically a plot device, a collection of short stories. The titular Crosstime Saloon is a bar in a rural part of Suffolk County?
So, I think
it's Long
Suffolk
Island,
County.
I think.
Yeah, it's definitely Long Island.
And it's a bar where you go, and throughout every story, the author makes sure to remind you about what a wonderful time it is to go to this bar, despite all of the evidence pointing to the contrary. There's a heavily codified process that you go through to publicly complain, and everyone has to listen to you.
Yep.
And at least 3 times people come in to hold up the bar and change their mind, and because, they just discover how warm and friendly everyone is in there.
Yeah, the whole setup is this weird thing where everyone in the bar is all too happy to drop what they're doing and listen to someone they know or a stranger spill their guts and talk about their feelings. And it's like this sense that you're entitled to be heard is, I think, one of the really creepy vibes of the book.
Yeah.
That makes it feel just a little unsettling or a little off-putting.
Yeah. And these toasts range from people throwing their glasses into the fire and declaring, "Fuck smack, I'm done with heroin,"
right,
to, "I was secretly sent here to destroy the world and now I can't stop it,"
right,
to, "I'm a woman who's actually 250 years old and I can't have children."
I don't mean to minimize that, but like, we should say there are exactly 3 people in this book. All 3 are basically props for a white guy to learn something about himself and have his sort of becoming moment, right? There's 2 women in the book. One is one of the 3 black people, and one is this woman that you just mentioned. And she also is primarily window dressing for you to realize that a couple of minor characters are, gasp, shock, actually people. And I just find that the whole thing, that her big problem is that she can't breed, incredibly reductive and incredibly, simplistic and sexist.
Yeah. I mean, the whole character is ridiculous. She's basically Miss Kitty. From an old Western, and she saunters into the bar and all the men fall in love with her, but then she's so sharp with a pud that everyone immediately realizes they've found their match and are like, "Hey lady, you can hang out and we won't just ogle you," so she keeps coming back. It's weird. I didn't like that story. The book is broken down into short stories like you mentioned before, so it's kind of hard to talk about it plot points as a whole, but there's definitely a unified theme, and the theme basically is that this is a magic bar that can sort of travel through time, I guess.
No, it really just sort of attracts time travelers, I'd say.
Yeah, that's more accurate.
Because 2 of the stories do feature a time traveler, and one of them is a standard time travel story. A guy comes back to try to change the past, which will change his future. It will shock you to know he's trying to rescue a woman who needs it. The other one is this extremely heavy-handed kind of hippie thing, an excuse for a soapbox. This guy has just been locked in isolation for 10 years and has missed everything from 1963 to 1974, and so pops out in 1974 and feels like a time traveler. It's actually kind of a neat idea.
It is, but unfortunately the purpose to which it's used is just the kids these days and, man, what's happened to the fucking country, and it's like if someone was locked in a cell for 10 years and then just emerged as your conservative uncle.
Yeah. Like, everybody's just on their Instagrams and their Carta Twitters and...
Exactly, yeah. Let's do some high points, low points, get some structure in this convo.
Do it.
I want to start out, I guess, with some positivity here.
Let's do it.
And I'm going to say that this is one of my high points, although I guess for some people this may be a low point. And I had mentioned this off mic earlier, in that I feel like this book gives me the same vibe as listening to an episode of Car Talk, in that, like, it's a crusty old man, like, delighting himself with puns. And despite the fact that I think the author was in his 20s when he wrote this, I'm going to continue to imagine that. And so that was one of my high points.
I think that's pretty fair. To keep it short and positive, I really did like the overarching picture of friends as family and people kind of coming together to support each other by being really open and honest and accepting. I really dug that.
Okay, cool. Me too. Yeah. All right, so here's a low point for me. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a big one that you kind of tapped into earlier, is that, like, this book has a problem in that you could tell that it's written to be an ensemble cast, but nobody really is developed at all, to the extent that you have characters named things like Fast Eddie and Long Drink McGonagall, and you're supposed to take them seriously as, like, players in these narratives when, I mean, they're sketched about as thin as a character can possibly be. It's a little hard when they start trying to bring in emotional stakes for these characters to take it, as anything more than just like, oh, really, I don't care. So that's a low point for me. I
mentioned this also off air. I kind of speed read this mostly on a plane and then kind of came back to go through it in a kind of more sober and nuanced way, and was halfway through my second read and looked up and said, gosh, I wonder if the narrator has a name. And he does. But I'd read it a time and a half and had read other books in this series and still didn't remember it.
I don't remember it now.
Jake.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, similar to that, I think my biggest low point of the book was just its tone problems. It's very light, it's really doodly, and it's really jokey and punny. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, but it's also trying to tackle these, like, really heavy issues. So you get these bad, zingy one-liners about Hitler. And it just seems like really inappropriate, and it kind of undercuts everything that's actually good about the message and the morals, I think. And it just reads, honestly, it reads like lazy forum posters.
Yes.
Going for shock jokes.
Yes.
And I really did not like that. Literally on page 1, there's a guy trying to make a light, zingy joke about a mass shooting, which went over very poorly with me this week.
Yeah. There's stuff in this book that is tough to read now.
Yeah.
And, that's definitely maybe not so much the fault of Spider Robinson as much as, where we're at as a society right now makes it a little difficult to find humor in anything that involves gun violence. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of parts in this book where you're supposed to find humor in things that involve gun violence, and that's a little tricky.
Yeah.
Okay, high point again for me. There are a lot of descriptions in this book of people who very obviously care about each other, and like you said earlier, I think it comes across really well. Like this, say what you will about Spider Robinson's punny nature and his inability to tell an interesting sci-fi story. He's very good at writing affectionate characters, and I think that that's something that's really underrated, because a lot of times people associate comedy with people being mean to each other, and I think this is a book that does have jokes in it, and everybody is very, very, almost sweet in a way, and I like that, even though there are a lot of missteps along the way. I think the general tone is very positive, and it's kind of a breath of fresh air to that degree.
Yeah, you could say it's a good portrait of people being good friends.
Yeah,
right?
In some ways it reminds me of Cheers. I don't think that's accidental. No. But it has that similar kind of vibe that, like people are ribbing each other and stuff, but there's real affection there and it comes through, and I do like that.
And it does predate Cheers by about a decade.
Oh,
so.
Wow, I did not know that. Yeah, that makes sense.
The first one of these came out in like 74 when it was set, so.
No, I mean, there was a point in one of these that I was reading something and I was like, fuck, this is like line for line from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where he's talking about the secret to doing some kind of magic is forgetting to think about it. And I was like, oh, that's the how to fly shit.
Right.
But this book also predates Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so such was not the case, and I was wrong.
I think it was just a parallel evolution. I think that's just sort of how people were thinking.
Well, to kind of get on that kind of piggyback on that. I think that there's a really interesting thing about this book to me, and that the device of it is remarkably similar to Venus on the Half Shell. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not.
Uh-uh.
Basically, in one of Vonnegut's books, I forget which book it was, he created a fictional author named Kilgore Trout and a fictional book called Venus on the Half Shell. And then another author later, with Vonnegut's permission, a couple years later, wrote the entirety of that book and included the excerpt as a joke.
Okay.
And this was early 70s, I think, right around the same time as this book. And the plot device basically is something very similar, where there's a bar that, in this case, it moves through time in the universe, but it's a colorful cast of characters. They sing songs, there's lots of puns. It's very, very similar. And as I was comparing that to this in my mind, it made me realize that this is also the restaurant at the end of the universe.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of really similar ideas that kind of sprung out of this particular small well of bar-based sci-fi, and I found that kind of interesting. So
you wonder if maybe the authors here were all just sort of writing what they knew.
yeah, maybe there were a lot of guys hanging out in bars back in the early 70s.
Yeah. Another high point that kind of goes with all of our high points, I think they all kind of cluster, is that, I do really like the basic politics here. I like a lot of the things that he's kicking against. We really have achieved technological miracles in the last century and a half, but we haven't become better people in pace with that at all. We're a group of human beings who obviously can't be trusted with handguns, and half a dozen nations have nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. That's bad. So definitely agree with you on this stuff, Spider.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of real valid points there, but I think that also kind of ties into one of my other low points here, which is that while this book is well-intentioned, I think it suffers a lot from a lot of problems that were really endemic to the American left in the 60s and 70s, in that there's a very simplistic view of race politics here that is very well-intentioned,
Yep.
but still kind of born of a real kind of stubborn ignorance. And there are parts that are a little bit uncomfortable. Like, of course, in the one scene where there's an interloper into the bar who comes in to cause trouble, it's a black teenager with a gun, and,
right.
They decide not to call the police on him after they get him out, and then they all congratulate each other about that.
Right. No, it's even worse. They do call the cops, but the description they give is of a white guy, and they all pat each other on the back about being so noble and giving this kid the second chance he needs.
Yeah,
right?
and I mean...
Yeah, it's my low point, right, is the smugness of this book.
Smugness,
that was my last
yes.
one. A huge amount of this book is the narrator telling you how funny the jokes you're hearing are.
Oh, yeah.
And how profound the insights that they're delivering are. And it's really just eye-rollingly bad.
Yeah, let's table this idea here, because you were talking about the narrator affirming his own jokes. And I think that's a big part of this book in more ways than one.
Yeah.
So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Pun Day.
Pun Day!
Let's drink, this town is so great. Drink, cause it's never too late to drink, to no big surprise. But what words rhyme with buried alive? What words rhyme with buried alive? You could be afloat for the 4th of July, based on your theme of wallflower.
All right, let's roll. It's I Don't Even Own a Television. We're still talking about Spider Robinson's Callahan's Crosstime Saloon, a book filled with fucking puns and bullshit. Before we went to break, we alluded to something called Pun Day, and I know you're all on the edge of your seat wondering what Pun Day is. Well, let me tell you.
So you've come to the right place, because you've got two pundits here to explain it to you.
Oh, God, we're off to a cracking start. So Pun Day is Tuesday in Callahan's Crosstime Saloon. It's a special day where the regulars get together and fucking inundate each other with horrible puns until the last man standing gets his drinks for free.
Right. And this happens in, I don't know, maybe 3 of the 7 or whatever stories in this book, right? It starts on Pun Day, and you get maybe 4 or 5 pages of these puns. And as we alluded to earlier, this is punctuated mostly with the narrator, Jake, telling you aggressively how hard everyone was laughing and how funny it is to hear these puns. What kind of puns, you ask?
Well, I just want to say, too, before we get into the details, I think if you were to go back, say, to the late 70s, early 80s, when joke books were popular, you'd find a lot of people who wrote joke books who secretly wished they were writing novels. This may be the only example of the inverse.
Whoa.
This dude really just wants to write a book of jokes.
Yeah.
And, man, it shines. Let's give him some examples.
Why the hell should I drink to the poor corpuscle? He labors in vain, Long Drink said simply. Ah, yes, I said, without missing a beat, but he vessels while he works. Plasma soul, exclaimed Callahan.
God.
So, yeah, you've got a bunch of blood puns. Let's explain this real quick. You've got a bunch of blood puns presented as toppers. So it's just a bunch of comedy writers sitting around riffing on blood.
Here's another good example, I think, of this. The theme, because there's a theme for Pun Day, is hearts in this case.
Yes.
So they're all trying to out-pun each other about hearts. So, Doc finally replied, and several people seated within earshot groaned theatrically. Have a heart, Doc, one called out. What a repulsive idea, the Doc returned the serve. Well, I know when I'm beat, said the challenger, and made if to turn away. Why, you young whelp, aorta poke you one, roared the Doc, and the bar exploded with laughter and cheers.
The bar exploded with laughter and cheers at that joke.
Yeah, there's a bunch of fucking...
So now you know that maybe this isn't a science fiction novel, but it's definitely a fantasy novel.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't happen in this universe.
Well, you mentioned forum posts earlier, right? And
Yeah.
this reminds me a lot of the stories that you read on the internet all over the place of people like shushed a child in the movie theater, and everyone in the movie theater got up and started clapping. Like,
hero!
yeah. This is that, but for the type of guy who like goes to an open mic comedy about like once a month and like reads puns out of a notebook.
Right. I have a name.
Oh.
And I'm sitting right here. So you don't need to own me via the medium of podcast.
I'm sorry I found your pun book. I was trying to keep it a secret.
Yeah, we all have our vices, and mine definitely include puns, as I think our listeners are aware of. But at least I don't pretend anybody likes it. Yeah. So again, that really gives the feel these mid-grade puns. Right, and a lot of them aren't even puns. There's also like a Tall Tales night that works basically the same. They're these long tall tales that all lead up to some weird play on words at the end, which are sort of pun-like.
They're better Nate than Lever stories. Basically.
Exactly,
yeah.
And it's very Tom Swifty.
Yeah,
right. If you remember those, where it'll be like, hand me those bricks so that I can be a bricklayer, said Tom laboriously, or something like that. Right?
I was going to say, like, hand me those bricks, said Tom heavily.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of that, which is fine, except that then, like I said, it's always punctuated with somebody explaining like, oh my God, this is great. And that happens with the heavier stuff too, right?
Yeah.
You're also supposed to believe it when the narrator says, and everyone was terribly moved by this amazing song that was played, or this amazing story that was told. And probably the biggest centerpiece of this is this law of conservation of joy and pain.
Yes.
Right. Which is this sort of like this based on, I guess, the laws of thermodynamics, right? Like joy and pain always exist in fixed quantities in the universe, except that one can be converted into the other or something.
Mm-hmm. It's that pain can always become equal joy, I believe is what he says. Yeah, so that story also contains another one of my least favorite things of this book, which is Spider Robinson obviously plays some music.
Does he?
You can go on the internet, you can find his music, and you can listen to it, which I would not suggest, but it's out there. But not only does he play some music, he loves writing about music. Mm-hmm. And he writes about music in a way that just made my head spin with its corniness. This is one of my favorite excerpts right here. This time, Fast Eddie jumped into the gap with a flurry of triplets. I could tell that he knew where he was going, so I gave him his head. As he unfolded a tasty statement, I looked around again and saw wall-to-wall grins.
Yep. It bears mentioning that Jake, the narrator, who just read that passage, or who was just narrated that passage, is a frustrated folkie who doesn't like the rise of rock and roll.
Oh yeah, there's a couple little stingers in here about heavy metal music too.
Yeah. I will say I was shocked when Alice Cooper was name checked at one point. I was like, right on.
Yeah.
We weren't quite hip enough to get to Dio, but baby steps. But I think it's also safe to say that Mr. Spider Robinson is a bit of a frustrated folkie as well. So there may be some authorial representation.
Yeah. Now there's a lot of descriptions of songs where he spells out the chord progressions. And I mean, nothing is more interesting than reading about a song where he's like, then the C sharp in the bass resolved itself to a B.
and so, like, I don't read music.
Yeah.
I found that pretty incomprehensible. And the descriptions around the chord progressions, like, he's talking about there was a skittering Richie Havens-like beat, and 2 sentences later, and then it resolved back to a Gregorian chant-like vibe. And I'm like, what the fuck does this song sound like? Is this like, John Zorn? Is this like
no,
botch?
I mean,
what the fuck is going on?
I definitely heard it in my mind as like a rapid series of pastiche, because he describes what I think are supposed to just be chord changes. He's like, it went from the C sharp Gregorian chant and suddenly resolved itself into the happiness of a B major, and then the Moog solo started. And like I did, you mentioned John Zorn. First couple Mr. Bungle records, Secret Chiefs 3, like that's what this sounded like in my head. Prelapse, another John Zorn project.
Actually, I'm gonna bum you out by mentioning a different book that I read by Spider Robinson in my misspent youth, where he describes a runaway basically comes into a shut-in's house, right? And the runaway is, you will not be shocked to know, a young female, and the shut-in is, you will not be shocked to know, an older male.
Plays the guitar.
Oh, does he? And he puts on a little music at some point, and he's blown away by how insightful she is, because she understands that the Beatles are the greatest band of all time, and that Frank Zappa is listening music, not talking during it music.
Oh, no.
So basically what we have here is a folky Frank Zappa song, I think, is what we're left with.
This dude loves Frank Zappa. It's not explicitly mentioned, but he loves Frank Zappa. Yep. I also mentioned earlier off mic that I get a strong, like, seriously into Kinky Friedman vibe from this. Which I think also kind of speaks to the political tone of it. It does, it has that 1970s, like, let your freak flag fly kind of mentality, which is charming at times and really myopic at others.
And we should note, Spider Robinson is probably the greatest Robert Heinlein acolyte of all time. Like, he loves Robert Heinlein, so he is a very personal freedom-oriented libertarian, and has been forever and ever. But that can have some darker moments, because that live and let live vibe can easily be overplayed. My biggest, like, what the hell moment while I was reading this was this description of a character who I think only is even mentioned twice in the book. His name's Spud.
Spud Flynn. I highlighted just his name because I was like, that's a horrible name.
It's maybe there's 2 Spuds. The one I've got is Spud Montgomery.
Oh shit, there's 2 Spuds.
Oh my god. Which, as an Irishman, I am stoked about.
See, I just thought of Devo right away.
But this moment just had me put the book down. This is why I can never finish a book in a setting or in a sitting, because I just get too upset when I read something like Spud Montgomery. Spud's from Alabama and never stopped fighting the Civil War.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be this, like, haha.
Quirky character trait.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's not a quirky fucking character trait.
Yeah,
man.
That makes him a literal monster.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in the South. I knew people like that. They were not fun to be around.
Nope.
I think also a case where that vibe kind of gets a little out of control is there's, for some reason, suicide comes up quite a bit in this book.
Yeah.
And there was a moment that very much shocked me that I think was supposed to illustrate how just matter-of-fact and serious everyone was here, where there's a character who talks about how he wants to kill himself. The owner of the bar, Callahan, here we go. Callahan lumbered around behind the bar, brought his shotgun from beneath it, and laid it on the bar top. Son, he said firmly, I don't like violence in my joint, and suicide usually strikes me as a coward solution. But if you need to die, I'll see that you do.
Right.
Which is like, suddenly he's Charles Bronson, I guess. And it's just like, huge total shift.
Right.
And also, I mean, he's implying that, son, you're not going to kill yourself in my bar, but I'll shoot you. Like,
right.
There's just some really weird shit going on there that I don't understand why at all.
I thought that particular scene, so if I remember right, that particular scene is there's a telepath.
Yes.
Right? And he can't really control it very well. And his older brother was also a telepath, and he saw what happened to his older brother, which is that he went completely catatonic at some point and is like locked in an asylum. And I think the idea is Callahan is saying the horrors that may be in front of you are so bad that I am willing to spare you from them.
I don't know.
But again, like with what you just read, A, none of it's fucking spelled out.
Yeah.
So I'm just speculating. And B, like you say, the tone is all jokey and has this pointless aside about suicide in general, which, who gives a shit?
It's the line before that, when he's asking why he's going to kill himself. The telepath is trying to reach out to his brother, who's been catatonic. And he says, what scares me is that I may establish contact with my brother and then not be able to kill myself.
Right.
Which, it could mean what you said. You may have the right reading, but who fucking knows? It's so vague.
Yeah.
That I don't know. Just to me, I just read it as a bar owner threatening a guy with a gun uncomfortably, and I didn't enjoy it.
Exactly. Similar to that, I think we should probably just call out as a special supplementary low point. Shitty gender politics, and I don't want to go too hard on this. I do think Spider Robinson is in general probably a good person. He's trying to be a good person. I believe that all of that. This book is a product of its time. Okay, all that said.
Yeah, I mean, once again, you have to run this book through the car talk filter in your mind, and I think that it does a lot if you listen to it from the same perspective of like, these are old guys who are probably going to make jokes about women being bad at driving, and that's stupid, but whatever,
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about something that comes up way more often in this slim volume than you'd think it would.
Yeah.
And that's sex work.
Yeah, why?
Wow, does it come up a lot?
Yeah, it does.
And so its mentions vary from the bar was more crowded than Dollar Day in a cat house.
Yeah.
And then like the great tragic figure character who we'll get to, Bobbi Joy. She was a prostitute, and it was of course the worst thing that ever happened. The one other woman with a speaking role in the book just sort of blithely reminisces about, quote, her first days as a whaler's whore in Nantucket.
Oh, and I believe she says, whoring is an underrated profession.
That is exactly where I was going. The profession is vastly underrated, she says. And it's just this really glib, smug thing. And so it's like okay for a white lady. It's not okay for a black lady. I think,
once again, what you're getting here is kind of this 70s thing where what he's doing, I think, is admirable, and that he's very much trying to be like, hey, it's not a big deal. This is a job. But then, on the other hand, he can't help but moralize a little bit about it because he's still got that old-fashioned core. So it's that little bit of half and half that happens throughout the book where it's like one step forward, two steps back, and it's a little frustrating for sure. Like, it's cool to see a book where there were sex workers in it that aren't portrayed as evil for doing so.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's a little fucking obnoxiously like overbearing with the moralizing as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then just to maybe put a pin in it, I think it's unintentionally really hilarious that the guy who literally comes back in time to save the great tragic figure is only ever referred to unironically as the meddler.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the great tragic figure.
Let's talk about the great tragic figure.
Because we're getting short on time to just chat here before we move into segments. So let's get to this. This is the crux of the book. This is where it all comes together, basically. Yep. So, after you.
So, yeah, the premise here is a time traveler shows up in the bar. It's the second time traveler. And he has come back because in his time, he was a record producer, so it's really relatable because, I mean, who among us hasn't been a record executive?
Yeah.
But he's come back because in his timeline, he has encountered the shatteringly emotional works of this black woman named Bobbi Joy.
Bobbi Joy.
Sorry, Bobbi Joy.
Because it's irony.
Exactly. And boy, and it's explained.
Yeah.
A lot. I can't believe I got that wrong because, yeah, it was explained several times. That it's weird that it said Joy on her driver's license because there sure wasn't any in her life. But she's kind of, I don't know, Joan Armatrading figure or somebody. She's a black woman, plays acoustic guitar and sings. And her songs are the most shattering thing you've ever heard, including this like incredible suicide epic that makes Metallica's Fade to Black sound like the happiest song you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And so he's come back to rescue her from this because he thinks this music is spectacular. It is so good that in the future, her songs cannot be played on the radio because suicides spike when they're played on the radio.
In some ways, she's like what every emo teen dreamed of being.
That's amazing.
Like, when I play dashboard confessional songs at this party, like 6 cheerleaders are going to kill themselves. Because they want me so bad and they'll never have me.
Oh my God, now I want to go buy a Bobbi Joy t-shirt at Hot Topic.
Black and pink one.
Yep.
Cut it apart, put it back together with safety pins. What's up?
Big heartstagram on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he comes back to do all this, and you know she is a prostitute, and she's been abused by a cop. And if you think that scene doesn't have a couple of puns in it, you're wrong.
Yeah. Meanwhile, while he's detailing this tableau of human misery, he can't help but inject a couple cheesy ass puns. It's a little frustrating.
And so what they finally do, after a couple of plot twists that don't really matter, is they pass the hat for this guy to give him enough money to go to the brothel and take her out for a night so that the climactic event of the bust of the brothel and the abuse by the cop never happens.
Yes.
And they're worried that this might go super wrong. Spoiler, everything goes fine, and they get like this another visitation from the time traveler with basically just a note saying, please destroy my time travel machine, and here's the song she did. And instead of it being this great gothic suicide epic, it's this happy, I sometimes wonder if things might have gone differently for me song. It's even more underwhelming, and I don't even remember if the chord changes were listed.
No, they're not. I like to imagine it's like the photograph in Back to the Future, but instead it's like 2 songs fading in on top of one another.
Or 2 videos fading in on top of one.
Yeah, and the second one like is very Disney-ish from the way the lyrics are described.
They're both kind of Disney-ish because they're both set with this woman like basically sitting on a stool in the forest like singers do.
Have you, when you we're around the same age. When you were a kid, did you ever see Olin Mills Family Portraits?
No.
It was this company that sold family portraits like a strip mall, and they had a few backgrounds you could select, and one of them was like a forest brook with like a tree in the background. And my mom and I had some pictures like that, and that's totally what was in my mind when they were describing it.
Maybe you had that in cosmopolitan environments like Florida, but I'm from the rock-ribbed Midwest, my friend, and we got our family pictures at a little place called Sears. And the backgrounds they had were the gray one and the brown one. Yeah.
I have friends who took their band's promo shot at Sears, and it's the most amazing thing. So we're going to break here with a special surprise for everyone. It's a secret recording of Bobbi Joy that we've unearthed from the depths of the internet, so please enjoy.
Yeah, we had to go to separate timelines to get this.
That's true.
Don't ask.
Roll it.
All right, here's an important folk music session from the 1970s.
Bobby, try it slower this time. Yeah, that's good.
Snow was falling heavily on US 40 as the day drew to a close. This lonely stretch of highway had seen no other movement all day. The stillness was so complete that the scrub pines and rolling hills by the roadside may have felt that the promise given them so long ago had come to pass, that man had finally gone and left them in peace forever. No snakes had swayed forth from their retreats that day, no lizards crawled, no wolves padded silently in search of winter food. All wildlife waited, puzzled, expectant, caught in the feeling of waiting. For what? Gradually, without suddenness, Each living thing became aware of a curious stuttering drone to the far east, which became audible too slowly to startle. It swelled, grew nearer, and small muscles and sinews tensed, then relaxed as the sound was identified as familiar. Harmless. A pale green 1960 Dodge with no more than 3 cylinders firing crept jerkily into view through the shrouds of snow. Wipers blinking clumsily, the great machine felt its way along the road, its highway song hoarse and stuttered. With a final roar of mortal agony, it fell silent. Wipers ceased their wiping. Pistons ceased driving. Lights winked out, and the huge car coasted gracefully off the road and rolled to a stop with its nose resting on a snow-laden mesquite. Stillness returned to US 40, and still, on either side of it, the animals waited.
Gentle on the windshield, sitting on the side of the road. Took a ride by engine light and left me sitting on the side of the road. In a little while I'll get out and start walking, probably a town pretty near. But it occurs to me that I ain't got no reason to be there, to be here, but I'll be leaving soon as I find a reason to. Right now it's nice just to watch the snow covering the windshield and window.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to rock? Welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about bad books. We've been discussing Callahan's Crosstime Saloon. We're going to do that a little more with some segments, but before we do, there's just a couple pieces of housekeeping I wanted to get to because there were a few notes I discovered that I hadn't mentioned that I really want to mention. One of these short stories is called Just Dessert, and it's about some pranksters that come into the bar and do a practical joke.
Really? I thought it was about what I do on my cheat day.
Ooh, just a big pile of pancakes like Vin Diesel. Or maybe that was The Rock. Either way. One of these men is very ugly, and he's described as such. When they passed out necks, he thought they said sex and asked for lots and lots. Great. But yeah, the real reason I wanted to mention this is the practical joke that these guys do involves one of them vomiting on the countertop, and then his friends pull out spoons and begin to eat it, and it turns out that he just had beef stew in his bag, and he thought that was hilarious.
What?
Okay, I'm risking at this point making my late grandfather a recurring character on this podcast, but my grandfather used to brag about doing this exact same prank on an airplane.
Really?
Yes, like he and his buddies. I don't know if I'm sure it probably is true. He was a fucking drunk and a weirdo, but love you, granddad, miss you. But yeah, like I guess they would, put stew in air sickness bags and then call over the waitress, and then when she came to get it, they'd start eating it with spoons and thought it was hilarious. So yeah, this book struck a chord there, I guess.
I can only hope that what happened to the characters in this book did not happen to your granddad, because in the book, the doc has seen this gag before, recognizes it right away.
Must have been friends with my gramps.
Yeah. Or maybe the doc is your gramps.
In an alternate timeline?
What? But what he does is slips a little ipecac into the beef stew, so after the accomplices eat it, they will be vomiting later, people.
I get it.
Boom.
Looks like the tables have been turned at Callahan's Crosstime Saloon.
Been hoisted by their own petard.
Their own Dinty Moore petard. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was kind of hilarious that this is the second book, I guess, in a very short span of time where I've immediately had thoughts of my grandfather because of dumb shit. So,
which we talked about a little bit off air. We had some questions about whether or not this counts as a weed dad book, because as you mentioned, there's definitely a very strong old guy really cracking his ass up at his own jokes vibe to the book. And I'm here to tell you that I definitely believe that Spider Robinson and his sock puppet characters enjoy some marijuana now and again.
Yeah, but my assertion here is that this is more of an dad book. I feel like dads of all stripes can enjoy this as long as they love horrible jokes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that's fair.
And weird moralizing about women and young people.
So, dads.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's get on into some segments here. Let's begin with what is your fave?
What is your fave? What is your fave? When you're presented with a list of options, what is your fave?
All right, here's some questions and answers. What is your fave?
All right. We've sort of touched on this. Jay, what is your favorite pun-like object in this book?
I don't know. I can't remember all of them. Do you happen to have an extensive list?
Golly.
Good.
Is my list occasionally annotated with examples? You betcha.
Awesome.
Okay, so is it perhaps the heart puns that we talked about earlier, ending with aorta poke you one? Is it the Stacy Keach joke that goes like this? Say, Fogarty, I hear tell Stacy Keach was engaged to the same girl 3 times. Every time the big day come due, she decided she couldn't stand him. Do tell. Yep. Then the late Harry Truman himself advised her, Gal, if you can't stand the Keach, get out of the hitchin'.
Jesus.
Okay. Was it the long music one? Which goes something like, Fast Eddie, says Callahan. How about a little inspirational music? Well, that would bring the problem into scale, says Doc Webster, and the battle is joined. I had already noted that, comes the hasty riposte from Shorty Steinitz. I'm going to stop there, but there are like 6 more.
Yeah.
Is it the electricity one? That riffs, that begins, I have a feeling this is going to be a good round Fermi,
Oh,
said
Jesus.
the doc.
Jesus.
Is it perhaps something from Tall Tales Night? Or is it something involving song titles like, There are tears in my ears from lying in my back and crying in the evening over you? Or, He didn't like her apartment, so he knocked her flat. So, what of those, Jay, in the world's longest What is your fave we've ever done?
Well, definitely the one about domestic violence. That's hilarious.
Waka Waka?
Except no. Actually, my favorite is not on your list. I'm sorry.
I find that almost impossible to believe, and you're going to have to prove that it's not on my list.
Well, I've highlighted one of my favorite passages.
Oh
This
my
actually made me laugh out loud because, as Collision has told me, I am a monster. Gentlemen, he drawled, demonstrating the trick. The story I'm about to relate takes place in the distant future. Interstellar travel is commonplace. Contacts with alien races are familiar experiences. One day, however, a planet is discovered out Antares Way, whose sole inhabitant is an enormous humanoid, 3 miles high and made of granite. At first, it's mistaken for an immense statue left by some vanished race of giants, for it squats motionless on a yellow plain, exhibiting no outward sign of life. It has legs, but it never rises to walk on them. It has a mouth, but never eats or speaks. It has what appears to be a perfectly functional brain, the size of a 4-story condominium, but the organ lies dormant, electrochemical activity at a standstill. Yet it lives. This puzzles the hell out of the scientists who try everything they can to think of to get some sign of life from the behemoth in vain. It just squats, motionless and seemingly thoughtless, until one day a xenobiologist, frustrated beyond endurance, screams, "How could evolution give legs, mouth, and brain to a creature that doesn't use them?" It happens that he's the first one to ask a direct question in the thing's presence. It rises with a thunderous rumble to its full height, scattering the clouds, thinks for a second, booms, "It couldn't," and squats down again. "My God," explains the xenobiologist, "of course, it only stands to reason." I like car talk. Sorry.
I'm so angry at you right now.
My God.
I cannot believe it cracked you up a second time. After, what was that on the clock? 45 minutes of lead up to a punchline that I'm not actually sure makes sense.
It totally makes sense. The thing only stands up when it has to reason. Oh, man.
But that's not an answer to the question that the xenobiologist... I'm very frustrated right now. Yeah, it should be noted that there's like 4 more of those on Tall Tales Night, and they all go about the same. So if that's up your alley, please allow us to recommend Callahan's Crosstime Saloon and the 45 other books in the series.
There's like a 20-page short story in this book that solely exists to build up to the punchline, 2 heads are better than 1. So it's that kind of book.
And it's weird because it's not actually talking about 2 bathrooms being better than 1. Which is obviously true.
Yeah, and it's an inarguable truth.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on here. Jesus.
I mean, it's impossible to follow that, of course. That sound you heard was my notebook falling to the earth. It's impossible to follow that, but perhaps there's something in this book that could be read in slightly less amusing or jocular fashion. Because this book isn't just jokes and tall tales, Jay. There's deep wisdom to be found here.
It's true. And I think it's time to lay the hammer down on some dramatic reading.
Dramatic readings. We're gonna make it sound important. Dramatic readings. Yeah, I got some words for you.
All right. Would you like to start us off?
I would love to start us off. This is a little nugget from a Halloween party, I believe, at Callahan's Crosstime Saloon. And it goes a little something like this. I glanced around the table, taking inventory. A fireman, a 5'7" duck, 2 bug-eyed monsters, 1 purple and tentacled, 1 green and furry, and 1 Conan the Barbarian. "Hey, Mike," I called to Callahan. "Introduce me and Finn around, and we'll swap stories." Callahan nodded and opened his mouth, but the doc put a beer in front of it. "I bear beer, bear," he announced, and another groan arose. You need to know now that Callahan is dressed as a bear. "Okay," I said. "I'll start the ball rolling myself. Howdy, folks. This here's Mickey Finn." Various hellos came from the group, and a pretzel landed in my drink. "I've heard of you, Mr. Finn," said the shepherd, grinning. "They say you're hell to drink with." Obviously, the shepherd hadn't heard about this Mickey Finn. This Mickey Finn, we should note, is the magic robot from space who's basically the Silver Surfer or the guy from Day the Earth Stood Still who was sent here to destroy us but then decided to betray his masters.
Yes.
Obviously, the shepherd hadn't heard about this Mickey Finn, and I glanced at Finn to see how he'd take it. I needn't have worried. Apparently, he had been hanging around Callahan's place long enough. "You'll make me feel sheepish, sir," he said with a straight face, "if you take my name too literally. Very badly indeed, for I would fain have fun with a fine Finn fan." Callahan and I guffawed, and Doc Webster's jaw dropped. "Lord God," the doc expostulated, "I'm going to hang up my puns, I swear." "A hypocritic oath," said the duck, and the doc heaved a bag of beer nuts at him. "Duck, duck the doc." Callahan and I crowed together, and the table broke up.
How many scenes in this book do you think could end with a freeze frame and like some credits like in a very 70s font rolling while someone like wails away on a harmonium?
Yeah, or like just a really tasty sax riff.
Yeah, or what's that thing? A melodica. That's it. The little keyboard thing you blow into that was in every single 80s TV theme. It goes like, "Wah, wah, wah," you know, Welcome Back Kotter and stuff.
Yeah, I definitely could hear like the Red Fox like
yeah, some funky bass
after just about everything in this. And would rather have heard that than most of the music described.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, speaking of music, I've chosen a selection here that's about the power of music in quite a visceral way.
You know, the heart of rock and roll is still beaten.
It is, and you know what else? Rock and roll can save lives, and we're about to learn how. I'm going to have another beer drink. The stranger lifted the glass pistol and aimed it at the meddler's heart, and I saw Callahan's big hands go under the bar for the sawed-off shotgun, and I saw Long Drink and the Doc and Tommy Jansen start to close in on the gunman, and I knew that none of them would be in time, and without thinking I spun on my heel, twisted the volume knob savagely on my amp, clutched my fishing as high as I could, and snapped the pick across it. A shrieking high note lanced through the air, and I rammed the guitar in front of the monitor speaker for maximum feedback. A red-hot knife went through every ear in the room, freezing the action like a stop-motion camera. The guitar fed back and fed back, building from a noise like a gut-shot pig to something that was felt rather than heard. Glasses began to shatter along the bar, then bottles on the long shelves behind it, and all at once so did that deadly little glass gun. Quickly I muted the guitar, and our ears rang for a lingering minute. Blood ran from a couple cuts on Callahan's face, and the gunman's hand was a mess. Doc Webster was at his side somehow, producing bandages and antiseptic from his ever-present black bag and steering the wounded man into a seat. So, yeah, feedback just saved a man from being murdered.
We should note that the reason the guy's gun is glass is because he's from the far-flung future of 1995.
That's true.
When no guns were simple guns like they were in the 70s.
They're all made of glass. And it should also be mentioned that this story opens with the clever little bit of foreshadowing that this was the night he finally learned what that gosh darn heavy metal music was actually good for.
I want to call out particularly fishing. I had to read that twice to figure out that that's what he was calling his strings for some fucking reason.
I've never heard that in my life, and I've been playing the guitar most of it, but I've never heard that ever.
Just makes me sad.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of talk referring to guitars as axes, stuff like that in here. There's like a lot of Guitar World level prose that when he talks about music, I get really sad.
It's one of the least objectionable things because at least, you know, there's that enthusiasm for it,
but
that passion for it, and at least it's not terrible puns or a guy trying to explain life to me in a way that makes me think that he doesn't know how life works any better than I do.
It's true, but it's a sad enthusiasm. Like, it gives you real bad, like, cover band vibes where it's just like, I don't know. There's just something about seeing somebody be that excited about something that they're pretty mediocre at that makes me feel a little bad.
It's that open mic vibe you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Like a guy just being that enthusiastic about like the wicked shred jams he played at like Irish Jam Night down at the local Irish bar on Tuesdays.
Like, and I mean, you know, once again, this is the characters that we're talking about here, obviously, but there's a lot of self-congratulatory stuff going on about a guitar player and a piano player who play 2 songs together once a week at a bar.
Hey, if that's their thing and like nobody in the bar is like throwing shit at them, that puts them ahead of bands I've been in. The only thing I was good at with bands was clearing a room. So...
All right, well, it's been a rousing round of games. Let's go ahead and go to break, and then we're going to come back and do some letters and... no longer talk about Callahan and his motley gang of time-traveling weirdo bar flies.
Drunks.
Stick around.
Stick around.
The wind in the wires made a tattletale sound, and the wave broke over the railing. And every man knew, as the captain did too, 'twas the witch of November come stealing. The dawn came late and the breakfast had to wait when the gales of November came slashing. When afternoon came, it was freezing rain. In the face
what up? It's I Don't Even Own a Television, where we talk about books that are bad. We've been discussing Spider Robinson's Callahan's Crosstime Saloon. That's a lot of apostrophes.
It is.
Yeah.
And Robert Callahan is, of course, a guy that owes us some money. So watch your back, Bob.
Yeah. We're coming.
For you.
Yeah. So we've been talking about this book. Now we are not talking about this book. We're going to talk about things that you want to discuss when we read your letters.
Letters.
A, letter B, letter C, letter D, letter E, letter F, letter G, letter, got a lot of letters.
Boom diggity. Apparently today is the day where I do a bunch of rap slang in a horrible white guy voice. And by rap slang, I mean things that like ad executives wrote in the 1990s. It's wiggity whack. Anyway,
Don't go there.
sorry. Talk to the hand, buddy. Talk to the hand with Mentos.
Oh, God.
Sorry. Yeah, letters. You got some?
I got a couple of letters. Let us begin with a letter from A. Meat.
Which one? Prosciutto? I'm a fan of prosciutto. You're not a fan, so...
I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
not. As a vegetarian, I am not going to explain which meat it is.
Okay.
Hey, guys. Long-time listener. Second-time caller. Record scratch noise. And while I don't have any wild animus-related shenanigans to report, I can say that my high school's library did have a copy of Left Behind. While this might sound unsurprising, something to consider is that I'm from Israel, a country with an evangelical Christian population of basically zero.
Wow.
How Left Behind found its way to the Promised Land is highly confusing, but how it got to a high school library is clear. Someone did not want that book in their house.
Okay. I don't know if Lehman still listens to the show or not, but he was my guest way back when we talked about Left Behind.
Yep.
And if he is listening, I'd be really curious because just in the couple seconds it took from hearing that, I immediately in my mind, this idea came to me that there's some dispensationalist who got it in its head that they needed to educate the people of Israel by leaving Left Behind. That falls kind of right into what we were talking about dispensationalism in that particular style of evangelical Christianity. I would absolutely not be surprised if someone, quote unquote, donated that book in an effort to educate. But Lehman, if you're listening, is this a thing? Let us know.
Yeah. Future letter.
Yeah.
My question is, what classics of literature do you guys think don't deserve the standing they're given? I recently read Brave New World on a flight and had the most miserable time with it. It's a piece of ideology masquerading as a science fiction story with a bunch of weird ideas about race, gender, and religion thrown in to make the straw men go down smoother. Anyhow, still love the podcast. Keep on reading terrible books so I don't have to.
Why don't you start us off here?
You know, this is one that I struggle with. I really don't have a lot of classics on my radar that I think aren't worth reading. I do have a major bee in my bonnet about when we're told to read things. I think a lot of us, you know, quote unquote, hate something from quote unquote the canon because we were forced to read it in a really inhospitable way in 10th grade.
Yeah.
And that is not a defense of the canon. I think the canon is, in general, wildly over-narrow, wildly skewed to the pale male demographic and all of that. That said, most of those books I have come to really like and really respect. So I don't have any on my list that I'm like, oh, that's just a shitty book.
No, me neither. I mean, I think the only thing that really jumps out to me is such an obvious thing to say, which would be Catcher in the Rye, because I really do think that it's a piece of like solipsistic garbage. And I remember enjoying it as a teen. I think going back and reflecting on it as an adult, it has a pretty horrible message. It's not incredibly well written, and it just like, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff about it that bugs me, but I also feel like at this point in the year 2015, saying that you don't like The Catcher in the Rye is far from the controversial statement it would have been, you know, like 30 years ago or whatever.
And I would even push back a little bit on that, because if you'd put a gun to my head and said, name two, you know, I would have said maybe that and maybe something like Portnoy's Complaint.
Yeah.
But I think that here we need to be careful to distinguish between a really good portrait of an awful person or
That's
an
a good
awful way
point.
of thinking.
That's a good point.
And a bad book.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think Catcher is something that, as a piece of fiction, has a lot of merit. I think the problem is how it's received.
Exactly.
And it's kind of become inextricably linked to its reception in a lot of ways. Like, it's hard to think about that book without thinking about teenage nihilism in a very personal way, I feel like. So, yeah, I mean, once again, I think we're kind of coming back to what you said, and that I think we're not like really talking about a young medium here. And especially when you talk about the classics, there's been a lot of time for, you know, quote unquote, the cream to rise, even if it is in a very narrow spectrum. I think most of the stuff that's well regarded as classics is done so for a reason. And although it's fun to be, you know, the person taking pot shots at things that, you know, like are like, hey, you know, this is a fucking cultural shibboleth, you're not allowed to make fun of this or whatever. a lot of times I think that would be pretty hollow if I were to start being like, Three Musketeers is garbage.
Yeah.
You know? So,
Shakespeare overrated.
yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's kind of where I come down on it too, I think.
Yeah. All right. Let's move to a second letter. This one is titled The Audiobook of That One Novel. I wonder what this will be about. And this is from Magnus, no last name. Hi guys, greetings from Norway. I just wanted to say that IDEO TV Pod is my new favorite podcast. Thanks. Woo. It's great to have a Bad Anything podcast that's not just an excuse for improv comedy, even if that's fun too. Off air, I generally do hand Jay like pool noodles and stuff and make him do short form improv games, but that's just between us.
So, Chris, I heard something funny happened on your way to the show today.
It sure did.
Really? Did it maybe involve a car?
No.
Oh, Jesus, you're bad at improv, dude.
This is me, no Andy, or nobody. Anyway, as an arrogant European, I am always amused about you making fun of something terrible and distinctively American, in contrast to terrible and distinctively European shit like The Alchemist. Stuff like Wild Animus, Ready Player One, or Bill O'Reilly writing self-insert fan fiction. Consider my surprise when I actually found a copy of the Wild Animus audiobook read by Peter Coyote for sale at my local library. I got it for less than $1, so no money wasted, but I'm not sure how I should pass this bad boy around. Putting it in someone's car radio or send the worst parts to people as out-of-context audio files? What do you say? P.S. Even though I kind of like it, I still want to see you guys do an episode on House of Leaves. If that one's too long, maybe R.L. Stein's adult novel Superstitious instead. Looking forward to the next episode. Thanks, Magnus.
All right, I stopped taking hallucinogens in college, so I can't do a whole episode about House of Leaves. It would destroy me.
Okay.
But beyond that, Wild Animus audiobook.
So I that one jumped out at me because I really like and respect Peter Coyote.
Yeah, that was disappointing to hear.
Very, but unsurprising. So for those of you guys who don't know, you may have seen him in movies. He's kind of a fairly successful actor. He's been around for 40 years, but he turned to acting rather late in life. But he's just this kind of pre-hippie San Francisco icon. He's a left-wing guy who's fought for all the right causes. He's been there for all the right reasons at all the right places for a lot of years. And it is unsurprising but saddening that he would read the Wild Animus audiobook. And I'm perversely interested to hear how he hits some of the lines in that book.
I am, but I don't want to hear it, to be honest. I think it would make me really feel weird and bad. Because I feel like if you're listening to that, you're very obviously listening to someone working for a paycheck. Yeah. In a very obvious way.
But something he believes in. Because I don't think he does anything that he can't buy into at least a little bit. He doesn't need the money.
No, once again, we talked about this on the episode. I'm sure Rich Shapiro is a perfectly pleasant man with good idedes. He just...
He's not good at writing novels.
Yeah, and that book, holy shit. Yeah. So, yeah, more power to everyone involved. But, man, that's fucking weird and sad. Peter Coyote, dude, really.
So to answer your question, I think probably the best thing that you can do with that audiobook is you need to make some choice, brief MP3s, and you need to deploy them in the following two places. Number 1, ringtone. Number 2, answering machine message.
Yeah, or make one of those soundboards that used to be all over the internet 10 years ago, where then you could prank call people with Peter Coyote talking about a ram phallus.
If you make a Wild Animus soundboard, I will PayPal you something.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't know if it'll be enough to care.
We'll put it on our website on one page that's explicitly styled to look like E-Bomb's World.
Yeah, that sounds mind-flayingly amazing to me right now. Okay, so the last letter is another second-timer, Jessica, no last name, who writes... As a person with severe depression who openly talks and writes about it, I believe that I have become the human receptacle of all bad advice and self-help books and religious bullshit for all of humanity, past and present. If that fact didn't already make me want to kill myself, the fact that The Alchemist isn't the worst of them certainly does.
Oh, man.
If you need any ideas, just tell my mother-in-law that you're too depressed to get out of bed today. You'll have podcast fodder for years.
Oh, man.
On a positive note, see, I'm not fighting the meds today. I was the one who wrote in thanking you for your work on behalf of my children. No pressure. Not only does your podcast get me through the tedium of adulthood and parenthood, but it also lifts my mood considerably. I recommended you to my shrink, and she loves it. So I just wanted to say thanks. That was probably the darkest, humorist letter I've ever received in any capacity. Thank you so much. We're obviously glad to help. And I think shrinks everywhere would probably love our show.
No, yes, thank you to you and your shrink.
Yeah. And we may actually well ping you on the horrible self-help tip, because I think it would be kind of fun to look into more like less fictional things along those lines at some point.
A while ago, a listener and friend of mine sent me a book that's a self-published book by someone who maybe is not 100% there, called How to Goodbye Depression by Flexing Anus, I believe is what it's called, and it's about a series of Kegel exercises that will help you cure depression. Maybe not something for the whole podcast, but, just a great book to read.
I mean, I'm flexing my anus right now, and I'm still depressed as shit.
Yeah. But, no, I feel like self-help is a rich vein that is yet untapped for us, so I agree. There's a lot of stuff out there that is pretty bogus, and a lot of it would be fun to talk about, so maybe that's something to explore in future episodes. Let us know.
Jessica, if you've got a particular one in mind, drop us a line. We'd love to see it. Speaking of recommendations, now that the letters segment has wrapped up.
Oh yes, we did this backwards. My bad.
No, it's all good.
Well, here's a good thing. And this is kind of an obvious choice, I guess, in that a lot of people have probably read this already, and a lot of literary snobs are going to groan when I mention it, but tough shit, because I think it's good.
And that's Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew.
It's a book by Glenn Beck called
Christmas Sweater.
Yeah, called The Christmas Sweater, exactly. No, seriously though, just because we were kind of reading a light sci-fi novel with puns and things like that, it got me thinking about Neil Gaiman's American Gods, which I think is just a super fun, lightweight little fantasy kind of sci-fi book. It's funny, it's fun, it's a cool adventure. Senta just recently started reading it for the first time, and kind of like talking to her about it has reminded me of how much fun it was to read for the first time. So if you haven't read that, I think you'd definitely have nothing to lose by reading it. It's just a cool story that kind of intersects with a lot of different mythologies around the world in like a real world setting. And, some of it's hokey, but it's all a lot of fun. And American Gods.
Cool. I kept it semi-similar, at least genre-wise, and it rockets us back to the halcyon days of 2008 when all science fiction by law had to be set in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a book called Moxyland. It's the first novel by a woman named Lauren Beukes, and it's like the book we read today, semi-connected short stories.
Is Yolandi or Ninja involved?
Sort of.
Cool.
That's a D. Antwoord? Is that who it is?
I just said their names because I couldn't remember how to pronounce their band.
Yeah, and I obviously don't know.
I just know them as they're those endearing folks from Chappie.
Yeah. I know them from a friend of mine visited and said, "Holy shit, you have to watch some videos." And so I did. And I said, "Holy shit." And he said, "Why don't you have a Mac? Because your laptop screen is shitty." Anyway, Moxyland is a good read. It's political in interesting ways, and science fictional in interesting ways. And I don't remember it as clearly as I'd like. So I will probably be revisiting it right along with you due to this recommendation. So please enjoy it.
Excellent. In the meanwhile, go ahead and keep up with us. I don't even own a television.com is the website. We're also on Twitter and Facebook at I don't even own a television. Oh no, that's not right at all. We're on.
No, Jay, it's IDEO TV Pod, for God's sake.
That's true. My bad.
This guy, I tell you.
I'm good at the internet. Yeah. So follow us there. Communicate with us. We got a little Facebook group. The people on it have started calling themselves idiots. I didn't make that up. I've secretly been wanting to refer to our listeners as that for a long time, but I didn't want to try to impose it on anyone from the top down because that's just offensive.
But now it's self-chosen.
Yeah,
and,
so thanks, idiots.
Oh, man.
But yeah, come talk to us on the internet, all that stuff. Send us your letters. I don't even own a television at gmail.com. We might read them on the air. I guess next...
We will definitely read them.
We will. We will read them no matter what. I guess our next show is going to be a very special holiday episode where we're going to dig into our most requested envelope.
That's right. The Bible.
That's true. This book is a bunch of bullshit.
Part 2, The Quran.
Yeah.
Special guest, Richard Dawkins.
Get ready, guys. We're going there. You're gonna cut yourself on the edge of this show next week. Not really, though, but what it is a surprise that will please you. So stay tuned. Join us then in a couple weeks.
And until then, what should they do?
I think they should keep reading crap.
Joy, pump it up. Pain. Come on, here we go. Sunshine. What else? Rain. Oh yeah, here we go. Joy, come on, here we go. Pain. Pump it up. Sunshine. Yeah, and rain. Give it to a raw face. Well, I'm the new kid. I'm just coming up. A lot of rappers think that I can't tear it up. Well, I'ma show them and ignore them. And when they think I ain't looking, I floor 'em. I mean, take them out. I keep grooving. A slick baseline, keep the beat moving.
And like you knew.
He heard his music and he's like, it's my walkout music. Time to walk out.
I want to go to an open mic night one, like
Oh my God,
somewhere.
you sing the Big Show song.
Either that or like a place where you have to go and like announce it and like be all like tune up and stuff, and then be like, "I'm an ass man."